Welcome, everyone, to the Charity Charge Show. My name is Matt. I'm glad you're here. Thank you for tuning in. At Charity Charge, our mission is to power yours. Outside of this podcast and blog series, we do that through equitable access to financial tools and services such as our credit card and gift card programs. If it sounds like that would be helpful to your organization, please do reach out to us. We are here for you. And today on the show, I'm very excited to be chatting today with Jeffrey Eysaman. Jeffrey is with the Christopher community and serves there as CEO. Jeffrey, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Now, I'm very excited to chat with you, about the work of Christopher community. Before that, though, could you give us a little background on yourself? What got you into the nonprofit space? I know that you've had roles with various organizations, and yeah, take us back and what kind of started you on this path that you're on today.
Yeah, sure. So I got my nonprofit start back in 2015. It was by chance coming out to Syracuse. I initially was working in a few of the schools through an enrichment time program where I was able to teach, and it was honestly my first time working with youth. And I'm sure I wasn't very good at it, but it allowed me to really get curious about how I can continue to build relationships, and actually led me to working at the Boys and Girls Clubs of Syracuse. So a lot of kids can say that they grew up in a Boys and Girls Club locally. I'm not one of those folks. I didn't have one that was near me when I grew up, but I like to tell people that I grew up as a professional in the Boys and Girls Club. So I started off just running a clubhouse, got into becoming a program director. And then in 2019, I actually took over as executive director there and was just able to learn a ton. They really gave me so much space to really dip my toes in leadership and some of and I think learn some of the lessons that today I can kind of draw back on. And I think always kind of keep in the back of my mind. It was the first place that I'd ever really kind of been part of a community, of really serving people. And shortly after that, I joined the YMCA here in central New York, and I think really learned kind of the business side of nonprofit. The YMCA is an incredible place that develops leaders, and I think like they really allocate a lot of resource to make sure that folks are building skills. And so very, very thankful for my time with them. I briefly went out to Boston and worked with the YMCA out there. But when you're married and have a couple kids, I think that transition was a little bit more than we expected, and was very fortunate to have the opportunity to come back to Central New York, and join the team here at Christopher Community, or CCI as I call it, and really have been learning a totally new space. Housing is new, but serving people isn't. So the expertise on the housing side is here. I have a tremendous team here who is so knowledgeable, and so patient, and really just focusing on continuing to serve our residents, making sure that we're playing our part in the communities that we're serving.
Mhm.
So even though some of the language is, a little bit different, serving people has been something that I've been doing now for about a decade, and I couldn't imagine ever doing anything else.
That's fantastic. Thank you for that context there. It does sound like a really great and quite natural path from your early days with Boys and Girls Clubs and involvement there. You mentioned the ability to kind of dip your toes into leadership and kind of utilize those over time. What would you say any unique leadership lessons that you've carried forward till now that you learned back then?
Yeah, I think the one thing that I'm kind of grateful for, while I was with the Boys and Girls Clubs, was I think at that time I didn't really have any perception on what a leader was. So at the end of the day, I was just kind of me in this new role that had these responsibilities, and I think it allowed me to just be an authentic um, teammate, and who just, I guess, had to make the final decision at times, right? But I think not having the pressure of feeling like I had to be something that I wasn't, or I had to be different than who I really am, allowed me the space to just, work with others. I think I've always been somebody who is a collaborative person, and I got my start there when I was pretty young. I think I took over the Boys and Girls Clubs there when I was 27. So I think that also allowed me to learn from some of the folks there that were a little bit more senior than I am, and I think put me in a position where I was kind of a listen first leader, and those are lessons that at the time I didn't realize, but would become very valuable tools as I transitioned into new places, especially coming into a new scope of work that I really don't have the experience in, not nearly as much as some of the folks that are here. And I think them seeing me come in and take the time to learn from them, consider their thoughts, value their experiences, and allow them a place at our leadership table. Those were things that at the time I didn't realize how valuable those would be for me, but now they're just kind of first nature. Again, I've been very fortunate to have some titles and some, responsibilities that I understand have a lot of value. But I've been very fortunate to simply just be a part of a few really, really awesome teams that have allowed me to grow, and I think I've probably learned from others much more than I've been able to teach.
That's wonderful. No, that's so great to have that collaboration, especially, working with organizations that have already been established and, bringing in, your new ideas while, always being open to and really asking, for insights and ideas from the folks that have been there longer, which is wonderful. You mentioned kind of learning the business side of nonprofit work with your experience at the YMCA. What was that like, and what kind of surprised you about the administrative end of nonprofit work, and what did you learn from that experience?
Yeah, sure. I think that not nonprofit work is so people focused that sometimes you forget that there are finite resources that allow us to do that work. Right. So I think being able to manage the operations, I think for folks that get the opportunity to do it, they understand that the better you are at that, the greater the impact that you can have. Right. So it's not always doing what's in your heart, but also kind of what's in your head, right? What's something that not only we can do, but that we can sustain, right? Are there more efficient ways to do it? Are there people that we can partner with who are, you know, already doing the work or who might already be in that space that makes it more feasible for both of us, right? So I think learning some of those things, having the opportunity to, you know, manage a multi-million dollar budget, right? When you talk about people and expenses, and the Y is a unique place because they are a nonprofit, but they've also figured out kind of like the secret sauce to driving revenue, right? And being able to really grow the operation, thus increasing the impact that they can have. I think being, that was a space, just it's so much more multifaceted than the Boys and Girls Clubs, simply because their population that they serve is so much greater. We had a singular focus at the Boys and Girls Club where the Y really serves from kind of birth through folks who are seniors. And so there's a lot more opportunity there to develop your business, create some new revenue streams with ideas that are innovative and that meet the needs of those that are kind of walking through your doors. So if you've been to a Y, I think you understand. But I think if you've been to multiple Ys, you'll also understand that there are no two that are the same. And so there's kind of a variety in there that allows you to really understand people. And so it's more about the people business,
Mhm.
and also kind of how you can reinvest some of that revenue that you're driving in to build up the skills of your team. And I think that, again, that's what the Y does really, really well, is that they invest in people. And, much like here, CCI has been doing this work for 50 years, 50 plus years, and we're only as good tomorrow as the people.
Mhm.
And so us investing in developing their skills and their knowledge only helps our business.
Absolutely. No, that's wonderful. You do, a common thread is the collaboration and investing in the people that I'm hearing you talk about, as well as knowing your community and their needs. And that's a good reminder that YMCA is a known entity, but no two YMCA's are the same because they're serving different communities with different needs. And that's fantastic to have gotten that viewpoint. And yeah, speaking of which, CCI, you're doing excellent work to serve the Western New York community. I have it here managing over 3,000 units across 68 properties in Central and Western New York. As the new CEO of this organization, you've already talked a good amount and given us some good insights on your leadership vision. How are you applying that to this new organization? I call it new. You've been with them for a little while now, but yeah, how are you weaving your leadership vision into the organization's mission now?
Yeah, I think again, coming in and being able to understand a lot of the groundwork that has been laid here for over 50 years. It is truly a privilege to be able to come into an organization that is trusted. It's a known commodity in our space, and that credibility makes a lot of things a lot easier. And having a great team who I think often thinks about CCI and the grand, scale of things and not just them and their roles also makes things easier. I think change and I think transitions is, it's hard. And so to have a new leader here, a new voice, right? A new direction that we might be going in is challenging, because it's not like there was a full stop on maybe anything that was going on before I got here, right? So they may be simply pivoting from work that they had already put some time and effort in. And I think the one common ground that we've all been able to find is um, coming to work in service of others. you know, I think regardless of the arm of CCI that you're serving, whether it's our development team that's looking for new projects, that's completing projects that were in our pipeline, whether it's our property management team that is taking care of not only our facilities but our residents, to our Section 8 team that is, making sure that not only are these vouchers um, getting di- distributed to the larger community, but also that they're doing the things that they need to do to work in partnership with these folks to make sure that we're recertifying and folks can continue the housing that they have a right to have, right?
Mhm.
And so I think it doesn't matter which department you speak to, everybody is pulling in the same direction of we're here for people who need us. We're here for people who need access to housing, who need it to be affordable,
Mhm.
and who don't need that to be another barrier in life, right? I think life presents enough challenges. So knowing where you're going to lay your head down at night shouldn't be one of those things. And we're simply just trying to play our role.
Mhm.
And so here we like to think that housing is our vehicle, right? Our properties is our vehicle, but our business is serving people.
Mhm.
And so we're just like others who are out there in the healthcare field or in education. You're serving people and you're allowing them to live with dignity and independence. And we're trying to do the same. And so as I continue to kind of learn um, this new area, I think our common ground has been how are we going to continue to serve people at the highest level?
Mhm.
And making sure that we're being present where we're serving to make sure that we're having critical conversations and that we're growing with them because life changes quickly and we're in partnership with them. So we feel very fortunate to kind of be in that space,
Mhm.
and be trusted enough to have the opportunity to do that.
That's wonderful. First of all, it sounds like as a new leader, you're coming in with the right attitude as well as your team and, you know, focusing on what's important, coming in every day and working towards completing or furthering, I should say, your mission, which is fantastic. It's a wonderful mission, and it sounds like there's a fantastic team behind it. That said, what are some of the biggest challenges that the nonprofit that CCI faces that you've become aware of in your leadership position, and how do you and your team overcome those challenges?
Yeah, so I think, Central New York is like many places right now in the fact that we're really faced with some housing challenges from an insufficient housing stock, right, to having the capital or the capacity to create spaces for people to live through their vacancies or restoration of properties. So there's, I think right now, trying to live in this space of affordable housing as costs of people are going up, right? Cost of the supplies and the things that folks are repairing our properties with, as well as I think just the growing need that individuals and families have in their lives. So, there are a lot of folks that are a car repair, that are a layoff, um, you know, a, a medical bill away from not being able to pay the rent. And how can we support them while also managing our business, right? And making sure that operationally we always have the things we need to operate at the same level. And
Mhm,
so we kind of ebb and flow with the challenges that our residents have and with the challenges that our community has. And right now that has so many layers to it that it certainly can create some challenges, but again, really grateful to have the people that we have here, because it's hardly ever the focus. It's always about being a part of the solution
mhm.
and looking out in 3 or 4 years and saying, hey, here are some ways that we can make some things better in the area that we have expertise in, and making sure that we're also connected to the resources that will allow that to all organically come together, right? Communities have many layers to it, and we're hoping to make the housing portion of that as secure as possible.
Wonderful. Yeah, that was kind of my next question. In the face of these challenges, yeah, what gives you hope about the future of the housing situation in your community, as well as the efforts of CCI? What keeps you hopeful about the next 5 to 10 years in a kind of an uncertain time for nonprofits?
Yeah. I think first and foremost, whether it's local officials, state officials. I know it's being talked about at a, federal level. I think housing is a priority for most communities. It doesn't mean that they don't have challenges, right? I think that they understand that there are challenges, and right now there's a lot of conversation around trying to figure out what's the solution. And so the fact that it's in conversation, the fact that we hear about it so much gives me hope that there's going to be enough effort around trying to solve that. And obviously, through an organization like us and many others, eventually there's going to come a time for us to play our part. I also think as we develop some of our projects, and I've been able to be a part of a couple ribbon cuttings. We've been making an active effort to visit a lot of our properties. As you said, we have 68 properties across central and western New York, and that footprint is bigger than any footprint that I've ever served. So being present and meeting the people that are living there and working there is a priority for us. And um, I think in making those rounds and going out and having some of those conversations, I think it allows you to see the best in people and to see people coming together in ways that are bigger than housing, right? I was out in Rochester last week and we had a local agency who was coming in and they were talking about mental health with our seniors. And so, we get to see these spaces, not just where people are living, but where other people are coming and contributing in ways that when I first got here, I don't know that I understood the power in the spaces that we had. And so
Mhm.
seeing it and seeing how easy and organically that, kind of all comes together on top of, the hope that support at the local and state levels are eventually going to kind of figure itself out, right? That I just know that there are the people on the ground and there's enough support around around this work that
Mhm.
it's hard to not be hopeful.
Mhm.
You go around and you see some of the hardship, but again, I think a lot of the folks here only see the opportunity that we have in looking out 5 and 10 years in central New York. We'd certainly love to be one of those people around the table that are taking that needle and moving it in the right direction.
That's wonderful. No, I appreciate that response there. No, it is pretty fantastic to see firsthand people coming together in a community. I mean, obviously, a big focus of CCI is housing itself, providing affordable housing. Question, with your experience, in community development and civic engagement, how do you envision CCI contributing to broader neighborhood revitalization and equity beyond just providing affordable housing?
Yeah, like I said, housing is our vehicle. So that's what kind of positions us in certain communities that we otherwise maybe wouldn't have been in. And I think the first piece to that is to be active and to be present, right? Things inside of our four walls get better when things outside of our four walls get better, right? So us being a part of community groups and being a part of conversations that are larger than our property is where we start. I think that that is an obligation that we have to the communities that we serve, to our residents who may or may not have the ability to do so, right? In certain ways, we kind of see ourselves as advocates for them, right? Are we doing our part in partnership with them of making sure that all the resources that can be brought to them and that doesn't mean that we're always going to be delivering that, but to keep our door open and make sure that our residents have access to it, I think is really kind of a first step in doing things kind of beyond housing, right?
Mhm.
Even though I think that there's a common thought here that is housing. You know, Housing is much more than the physical structure, right? And then I think beyond that, again, I think doing all that we can to make sure that we are focused on affordability and even in our future projects, right? Are we taking a standard approach of putting up a property and trying to fill it? Or are we being, intentional about who we're partnering with? We have a couple of our newer projects that prioritize folks who have been dealing with homelessness or mental health and making sure that they have preference to some of our units in that building, right?
Mhm.
And giving them a place in a community where they may not feel connected, where they may not feel accepted or cared about, and giving them a place that they can have a fresh start and that they can not just survive, but thrive, and making sure that they have the resources in order to do that. So for us, keeping our property safe and quality is always going to be kind of like the standard in which we operate. But I think those other layers that we're looking to add and create more of a consistency um, around is what really separates CCI from other places that just have a building of strangers. We're truly
Mhm.
trying to build community inside and outside of our walls.
That's wonderful. It makes all the difference. That is fantastic. Jeff, if you've given us so many great insights into nonprofit leadership. A lot of our listeners are nonprofit leaders themselves, some of whom are taking the helm of a already established nonprofit, and some that the nonprofit is at its infancy and just getting up and running. But what advice would you give to nonprofit leaders that are either stepping into a new role or a new nonprofit?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I can say, whether you've been in nonprofits for a decade or if you're new, is we need to continue to work together. There is a feeling around the scarcity of some of the resources that we have available to us that I think naturally make us feel territorial, that I think put us in a position at times where we feel like we're we're fighting for crumbs. And I think we have to shift our mindset around that and understand that we're better together. Um, that we all exist in the community because of the needs that we meet and the people that we serve, and there's many overlaps. That and that's a beautiful thing, right? I am grateful for my residents that live with us that have employment services locally that they can connect with, and that they have, rideshare services that they can connect with, and they have childcare services that they can connect. And, that's an ecosystem that truly supports in a holistic way. So we don't have to be scared to work with one another. It has been my livelihood, and it has been really kind of the driver in some of the success stories that I've been able to be a part of with the organizations that I've served, working with others and having other people open their doors to us or allow us access to their families or to their spaces. And so don't be fearful, don't be territorial, and understand that together we're whole,
Mhm.
and divided, it's so much harder to do the work. So appreciate, I think, the beauty that exists in all of us being able to carry our share of the load,
Mhm.
and invite others in, outside of those that we serve. We need to continue to make this a space that is an attractive space for younger leaders, for a generation that's coming up in a world that's driven by capitalism, right? You're going to want to go to a place that can pay you more and can offer you the most things. And I think we lose kind of that focus of service to others.
Mhm.
And so when it becomes more challenging because we're not supporting one another, it has a whole nother effect of that we can't retain talent or we
Mhm.
can't attract talent, right? So continue to appreciate one another, continue to work together. Um, and I think ultimately you are going to see that our communities are stronger when we are connected.
Wonderful. Now that does come up quite a bit. The scarcity of resources, and I think that change in that mindset is more important than ever. And so we're hopeful that that is a shared sentiment, because yeah, collaboration can go so much farther, and there's no need to necessarily be competitive in the nonprofit space. So thank you for that. Jeffrey, thank you again for joining us and for all of your insights and sharing your story as well as your mission. How can our listeners best support you either directly or in their own communities?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing would be to, if you want to learn more about us, we are on all social media platforms, LinkedIn, our website, www.christopher-community.org, where you can see our property. You can see a little bit more about the work that we do. And we're actually going to be rolling out a new website soon, so come and check it out. And for anybody who wants to continue the conversation, reach out to Christopher Community, reach out to myself via LinkedIn. It's Eisman, Eysaman. And we would love to continue to connect and to collaborate and to have productive conversations, as well as we'd love to learn more about you and the work that you are doing and how we can also help support you.
Excellent. Thank you again, Jeffrey. This has been wonderful, and we wish you all the luck in the world with your mission, which is an extremely worthy one. Thank you again for being on the show with us.
Thank you, Matt. It's been fun.